Well, Gareth, great to speak to you as ever. It feels like the heavyweight division is a bit of a mess at the moment, or am I wrong?
No, I don't think you're wrong. I think it is a mess. That was my feeling when the year ended and we went into 2022. But when you look at the stacked schedule for February and March, and you see the number of events and great fights that there are, Sky Boxer, DAZN, Hearn, Axis, and also obviously Frank Warren about to announce several fights. We only need the heavyweights to fall in, those two big heavyweights fights to fall in, Fury and Whyte and Usyk and Joshua to fall in April. And I think they will be in April. Then we've got a great schedule for the beginning of the year. And we're then looking at an undisputed title by the end of the year. But as you say, there's shark-infested waters and a lot of barbed wire to go under and through before we get there with the heavyweights at the moment. It is a mess because, we thought last October that we would be getting an undisputed title pretty soon. We knew that Joshua and Usyk would go into a rematch. That looks like mid to late April now, according to Eddie Hearn. So that's an outdoor event, Spurs potentially, or Wembley, as Eddie Hearn's outlined just a few days ago. That's really good news. The big stumbling block now, of course, is Tyson Fury and Dillian Whyte, which brings the big rival promoters into play together. Frank Warren and Bob Arum, the Hall of Famers on one side, and Eddie Hearn and Dillian Whyte and his cases with the WBC on the other. So that's the bit that feels like a bit of a mess, I think.
And what do you think happens? Because we're in a situation now where purse bids were supposed to happen today or tomorrow. That's now been pushed back a week. Do you think any negotiations will happen before then? And do you think purse bids will happen next week?
I do. But I do think that 7-day hiatus, James, is really good news, because it means that they aren't just moving on and finding a fight for Tyson Fury. Yes, they'll be looking at other fights, of course, because they want to get him out, as Frank said, on March the 26th. Bob Arum's confirmed definitely in the UK. But if the Whyte negotiations or Whyte Fury negotiations take place this week and they talk maybe around the 80-20 split and they get to 75-25, 72-28, 70-30, I think we're on. And then I think they might push the date back a little later so they can push it outdoors. They could do it in early April. If you want to try and make 25-30 million from that fight to make it viable, so that Whyte's earning 5 million and Fury 25 million. If they really sell that fight and they get a big audience, I think it's a big fight in the UK, then I think we will get it. And I do think that extra week does give the opportunity for them to renegotiate, have a little look at it. Arum and Hearn may play hardball, real hardball, and say, no, we're not shifting from 80-20. And then Whyte's just going to have to take it, or they'll go to purse bids. And then, of course, when it goes to the purse bids, as Frank Warren outlined on Fight Night on Saturday night, there's going to be some mega bids coming in, because people will see, they'll really assess how much the fight is worth, and they'll be bidding huge amounts. Eddie Hearn, if he wins it with DAZN, they could put a huge package in. Sky could win it, Triller could win it. You just don't know. So there's lots of options open. I'm really glad that it's been extended another week.
Do you feel like Tyson Fury, despite the fact he's the WBC champion, has been punished a little bit because of this situation with the WBC and the arbitration that's going on with Dillian Whyte? Because he spoke at the end of last year, he said, I want to be fighting February, March. But as you're saying there, it does look like it might be late March, April now.
Yeah, well, I think what happened with Tyson, he had that brilliant fight in October. He'd been in 2 camps, hadn't he? He'd been training all year, hadn't fought for 20 months, had an amazing fight, was really up afterwards. We've seen him. I went on tour with him on his homecoming tour, did 2 venues. He's in an amazing place. He stayed fit. He was in camp with his brother Tommy, even though that fell through with Jake Paul. And I think the longer he's out, the worse it is for him. So, yes, of course, he wanted a fight by the end of February. But this limited venues in the UK, for a fight of his magnitude now. He's a huge star. He's crossed over into the mainstream. I think with Tyson, as long as he knows he's got a date in the diary, and he'll be expecting that soon, and I think he's fine. I think mentally he looks really well at the moment. So I think he'll want a date in the diary. It's as simple as that. And they'll want to get this fight sorted out as soon as possible. If it all collapses and there are purse bids, a time will be set, of course. And I don't think he'll have a fight in the interim, but it's a huge game of chess right now. And that's what feels like a mess, really.
You've worked in this sport for such a long time. Have you got a bit of fatigue when it comes to the heavyweight division with all the waiting around, the inactivity, the rematch clauses? How do you feel about things at the moment? And do you have a solution? Not that boxing needs fixing, but maybe improving it somewhat.
Well, I think in June last year, I'd done a piece. I had done a piece. Bob Arum had rung me 3 or 4 times one evening. I missed 3 calls. I rang him back. He said, Fury and Joshua is dead in the water. It's dead in the water right now for that August 14th date that was originally scheduled. And the coverage of that had been, at length for months and months and months. We were all looking forward to 2 fights between them. And when it collapsed, you did feel a sense of depression over it. God knows how the fans felt as well. But I think and everyone was oohing and ahhing over the 3rd Wilder fight. Look what it turned out to be. And then, when there's huge money at stake, when there's huge negotiations and huge money, you've got heavyweight boxing and you've got the rest. Yes, Canelo commands huge fees and he's a great star, and Pacquiao and Mayweather were when they were fighting, but there was never the same issue with them. Fury's the A-side now in many of his negotiations because he's such a big money spinner and a big draw, in the same way that Anthony Joshua is, even though he's lost against Alexander Usyk. Yes, he's got to repair the damage that he's created, but it's always like this around big heavyweight fights. And it's just because they are the blue ribbon guys of the division, and it's always been that way. And you've always got rival promoters and rival TV companies trying to keep their fighters in their stables and on that route. That's why we haven't seen Errol Spence and Terence Crawford yet. One side is ESPN and Bob Arum, the other is PBC and Fox, of course. And those guys, let's be honest, should be in a trilogy by now. Instead, they're fighting other people. Yes, they're having great fights, but it does get in the way. The way it's all works is awful, frankly. But there's no world's governing body. There's no one overseeing the sanctioning bodies. And I think the thing that Mauricio Suleiman of the WBC told me last year, when the 4 presidents got together, if they can create more unifications quickly in the heavyweight division and the other divisions, and maybe we could move towards one ranking system, I think things will be resolved more. But it's always been the Wild West, James. I think it always will be.
We both spoke to Eddie Hearn last week, and he was tight-lipped, wasn't he, about Anthony Joshua's training situation. Yes, he admitted he's going to fight Usyk in April, but there is a lot of mystery around what AJ is doing at the moment. What do you make of that?
I think it's brilliant that he needs a change. It is a risk, as Eddie's outlined, a huge risk, he called it. But one of the things that I do think, one of the things that I do think very clearly is that if he was unhappy with what went on against Usyk, if he was following a training regime set out for him by his team, then he does need a change. I think, some of the interviews he gave in December, when that fleetingly, he looked at that step aside option, it was never actually on the table, Eddie Hearn said, realistically on the table. He never went to him with an offer. I think Joshua was a little confused at the time and he was still making his mind up. But I think a change of trainer is a good idea. I still suspect Rob McCracken will have a bit of a say in proceedings with him and he'll still consult with him. Anthony Joshua is not a silly man. He's not a stupid man in any way, shape or form. He knows what he's learned from Rob. But I think a trainer that gives him a more aggressive outlook, to be more positive, to be confident in his own abilities, not to try and be something he's not. George Foreman said it as well. Be what you are, decide what you are and be it. And he is a destroyer. He's an aggressive, come forward fighter. And I think that's what he's got to be. He's got a good jab. And I think to beat Usyk in a very difficult rematch, he's got to be aggressive. He's got to show what he did in rounds 4 and 5 in that fight.
And finally, I want to ask you about the rest of the heavyweight division, because it feels like there are a number of fighters now stacking up. They're waiting for their opportunity. It might take a year or two for them to get their world title shot, but there certainly are some exciting prospects outside the big 3 or 4.
Yeah, outside Joe Joyce, who I think is already there, and he's very kind of formidable, and he's shown that in recent outings. I think Daniel Dubois on his comeback trail looks very good. It looks like he's going to fight the world champion, WBA champion Trevor Bryan soon. Frank Warren's working hard on that. That's a great fight for him. It'll give him a lot of resonance. But 2 Eastern Europeans as well. Flip Hrgovic, I think Flip's 14-0 now with 12 knockouts. No one seems to want to fight him. Very, very good heavyweight fighter. And also Bakadir Jalolov, the super heavyweight gold medalist from the Tokyo Games this summer, or last summer rather. 8-0 now anyway, because he was allowed to be pro and then go back into the Olympics, of course. Managed by Lou DiBella, I think. He's a real prospect as well, the Uzbek. Fantastic fighter. I think those 3 are going to rise very quickly. And the likes of Wilder, Whyte, Fury, Usyk, all in their 30s. Those young guns are going to be coming up quickly now. And I think we could see them challenging by the middle of next year.